Amanda, welcome to the table at the Art of Friendship podcast. We're glad to have you.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I feel like I know you a little bit. I've had a handful of conversations with your husband, Dallas Jenkins, over the course of the last 3 years, talking about different aspects of The Chosen. But he's also talked a little bit about you in the midst of that. And so I feel like it's time. We needed to get
Oh,
to meet you face to face and in person. So
in the
thank you for
flesh.
giving us your time. Yeah, in the flesh, in the flesh. And I want to hear some things about you. I have many things that it would be beneficial for us to talk about, but I also think just the personal side would be interesting for us to get to know a little bit about you. Let me start with this. You guys relocated to Dallas not that long ago
Yeah.
to take on the project on a piece of property that was going to work for you. So this was really a project driven, you might say a work related, obviously, move. How has that been for you? You're a mom for your kids. Tell us a little bit about the transition from you.
Well, it's great being with Dallas, in Dallas, and because the show takes them away, quite a bit. And so we came down to be near him, and that's been great. But moves are hard. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just what it is. Moves are hard, and I've got high school kids and got college age kids too. But for high school kids, it's a tough thing. So I feel like we're coming out on the other side of it, and it's waters are smoothing, is what I would say.
Well, we're glad to hear that because I am a Texan, and we're
Yeah.
we're a national ministry, but this is my home, and so I'm glad to hear. I hope you're receiving some good Texas hospitality.
Texas is great. Texas people are great. Yeah.
Oh, I also heard. I just want to ask you a little bit about this. One of the conversations that we had was I'd asked Dallas how you guys met, and it turns out that you were dating his best friend when you guys met.
Slight correction.
Okay, now I want to hear the real story.
I was friends with his best friend.
Ah,
Um,
uh-huh.
didn't want to date, and thought Dallas was really cute, and so didn't even want to like double date with Dallas, who did have a girlfriend, because I was like, I'll just be looking at that one the whole time. So, yeah, we finally figured it out. We did this for a minute, and then we figured it out.
I love that that story is slightly different from both of your perspectives. So I'm gonna have to go back and
Lots
listen.
of ways in marriage.
I'll have to send you that clip so you can hear his version of that. You guys have been partners for a good many years. You've been married, what, 26, 27 years now? And you've gone through different seasons. I think Amanda, it's very well known, has been talked about the ups and downs and the season of quote unquote seeming failure that preceded this season of The Chosen really exploding and taking on a life of its own. But when you think about this is a podcast about relationships, about friendship. In every relationship we have, there's an element of friendship. But specifically, when you think about the friendship element between you and Dallas and this roller coaster of ups and downs that really is common in every life, where you have landed now, looking back, where have you seen the arc of that friendship be instrumental in being ripe for this season that God has put The Chosen in your lap?
It's a really sweet question. We're best friends for sure, but also really, really respect each other's opinions, which has been cool. I know that that's sometimes unique, that not everybody has that, and so I feel like one of the things we didn't used to do well was. Maybe I didn't do it. No, he didn't do it well too. We didn't do exits and entries well, meaning he would go away to work. He's always been a filmmaker. He would go away and he would come back in, and we would not do well, because there were expectations, because time away is hard, because I'm dealing with kids, because he's exhausted from what he's doing and all those things. And we just kind of had this stop go thing that was really difficult, and it would take us a while to get back into a rhythm. And I feel like not only just through aging and being more mature probably, and my kids being a little bit older, there's just some things that have fallen into place better, but also just being forced to trust the Lord in the way that we have, with finances and with plans and with Dallas's movie failure and what that's meant for the future. I have open hands more in life. And so I feel like when you have open hands to the Lord, you really have open hands with each other. You kind of can't do one and not the other. And so for me, the thing that the Lord is teaching me to do with him is really just spilling over to my husband. And I'm just more gracious and I'm just more understanding, I think, than I used to be. And so I feel like our friendship is more steady and consistent. We're not having kind of these up and downs we have to work our way back from. It's just been I think the Lord knew we needed 20 years under our belts before handling the stress of the chosen. So that's been a sweet thing to go, I'm going to give you this when your marriage is going to survive it.
Well, I mean, that is true though, because everything we experience, it's filtered through the relationships in our lives, and it can't not have an effect. One of the things I recall Dallas sharing previously was that he felt that in your partnership, in your friendship, you have more of a spiritual, intuitive sense than he did. Or he certainly felt like his was growing, but yours has been deeper, longer, and that you were just more intuitive, more sensitive to what God was speaking through his word and toward your future and into your present. He shared how after that season, you had spent a lot of time in the Old Testament and really felt God saying, look, the kings of old, they fell when they were at their pinnacles of success. That revealed the weaknesses in them. And that you felt that God was speaking, and this is prior to the chosen being the phenomenon that it is, that you felt God was speaking into that for you. And to share that, when you, in a relationship, when you feel like you have something that significant to share with your partner or your friend, that you don't want to come out and say, hey, God told me to tell you. And that was never successful. If you're thinking about trying it, people don't do it.
Timing is everything.
So from the foundation of trust, though, we can share. What was that like for you to hear that from God and then to try to communicate that with the gravitas you were feeling it?
Okay, I mean, so I'm learning timing is everything. I've never been afraid to share. So that's not my problem. My problem would be like not sharing some things. So I can't say I had a problem with that. But the timing, I would say, I think Dallas was watching, I think we were watching each other really pursue the Lord in a new way. And so when I would come to him with things of like, hey, here's what the Lord is saying, that was the spirit in which it was given. It wasn't I think you need to work on this and you need to be aware of this. It was really like, okay, this is what the Lord's teaching me and it's really putting this on my heart and that. So I think the spirit behind it was a very approachable but yeah, God led us into the wilderness and then he started showing me what it's like to be let out. And going in was scary. Releasing plans was scary. Not knowing how we were going to pay bills or what was next or where God was going to turn, that was scary. But what became scary, because God's so present in the wilderness and in his provision and his presence, it was this idea of leaving the wilderness. And when the Israelites got into the promised land, they screwed it all up. Abundance was a real problem and led them far from the Lord. And he just had really lots of years ago had that just on my heart. And so I do think we were a little bit prepped for the show to do well, because it was like, the warning is, don't forget who got you here. This was not your doing. You didn't provide for yourself in the wilderness. You didn't tell yourself which way to go. Neither are you going to do well if you're suddenly on your own when and if it does do well. So yeah, I think it just got a good, strong warning from the Lord, and we were both in the position to listen.
There are a lot of couples that are growing their friendship together. It really is a lifelong journey in marriage, right? Becoming friends, and just like every friendship. For a lot of couples, though, it's more likely for a woman to want to share her spiritual journey with another friend, or a guy to, kind of talk with guys in a guy kind of lingo, which is not always very deep. It can be really difficult for married couples to
Yeah.
share their spiritual journey, to be transparent, to say this is what God's doing. For a lot of people, it can feel like a very private journey. They're
Sure.
uncomfortable or insecure about sharing it. Just
Hmm.
thoughts on what that looks like to lean into that in
Yeah.
your marriage friendship so that your spiritual journey is something that you're sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I think you practice it in the smaller things for sure. You start practicing talking. I think people don't share enough when there isn't a problem. And so sometimes we share when there is a problem, and then we do it in the wrong way because we're not practicing it. So
Yeah.
I do think it's good to say, you know, when God's sharing something that He's working in your heart or something you're thankful about. I mean, how many times has God shown me in prayer when I'm frustrated with my husband? God showing me something that's actually great about my husband. He's done that to me. Why don't I share that? God really, because, well, lots of the times, because I don't want to give, you know, I don't want to give a compliment when I have a thing I want him to work on. But I think it's when we start with those littler things, right? When it's like, you know what? God really showed me that that's great, a great thing about you. Or, hey, I read this verse today and here's how it impacted me or convicted me or whatever. And if we start sharing just in the smaller things, I think when disaster strikes, and it will, we are in the habit of talking. I just think we need to be in the habit of talking. We've dealt with a lot of things in our house that aren't normal. Autism and some other things. Another one of my kids has a physical disease that's really difficult and lifelong, and then we went through adoption, and the way we handled it is we processed out loud, and I think a lot of people struggle to process out loud, but then those things get harder, and when it's not in the light, you don't have perspective from other people, and you don't have prayer from other people, and you don't have help from other people. And so we've really practiced through all those things that we've had to do. We do it out loud. We do adoption out loud. We do autism out loud, like not in an inappropriate way, but we practice talking. And so I think when it came down to real marital struggle, things we had to work through or fears that we had, we were in the habit of talking. And so I think it's good to, if you're not in the habit of talking, start in the small things for sure.
One of the things that comes across, I think, about your personality, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I recognize one of my own. You're a problem solver. It's like, there's a problem. Get out of my way. I got this. I'll fix it. Let's move on. It's like looking in a mirror, sister. You just recognize your own. So the downside to that, of course, is the whole aspect of dependence. Learning to step back and believe that God is a better problem solver and that He might not actually want you to do what you're leaning into. One of the things that is obviously well publicized about your partnership with The Chosen, this is very much your project as well as Dallas's project and the other writers' projects, even though your name's not always up front, is that you have really leaned into going to God as the problem solver primarily, leaning into prayer as a primary part of your ministry in this project. And for that, what has that been like? And has that been difficult for you as a problem solver to step back and not go, let me just give you my thoughts first?
Yeah. I think I still do that. I still give God my thoughts first, for sure. Yeah, I think God has kept me in a very clinging place, to be honest. Like I think He was very kind when He first called us into this, what I call this wilderness walk, where we were going without a job, we were going without income, without health insurance, and these things. And I watched God provide, and then the next thing would happen, and He provided, and the next thing would happen, and He provided, and He was very kind in training me up that way. And so now I do see Him as the better problem solver. I still, in my flesh, volunteer my ideas first, always. And then I have to cry as I re-release them. So I think He keeps me in a place of great dependency, through my parenting specifically, through time. There's just not enough time in the day for us to handle this project. This project is too big for us. And so we're having to hire people and release tasks and things that we don't get to control. And so I think God's keeping us out of control on purpose so that we would continue to cling. So I don't know, it's a combination of me learning and doing some things better. And then it's just the Lord keeping me off balance most of the time.
I'm wondering how much of that is working its way into the the companion resources that really you're spearheading for the chosen. So many people wanted to say, well, I like to do a Bible study. It's really fun to see my husband and a group of, they call them the Old Man's Club, all these guys, when they're really mostly in the summer, because that's when they've got some time, they all meet on a Tuesday night, they watch an episode, and then they hash it out together, all these guys together, and they're loving it. It's really been bonding. But a lot of people have that desire, but maybe not the initiative. And so you have taken on spearheading the companion resources, Bible studies, devotionals, those kinds of things. How much of your journey has influenced the pieces that you've been putting together for other people?
Yeah, I mean, it just does, because I have writing partners, and we work together we literally sit in front of the Lord and go, okay, I'm working through this. This is where he has me, and this is the verse that he brings today. And the devotionals and the Bible studies are an outpouring of us being on our faces before the Lord. I mean, that's what it is. So there's a plan to a degree behind the extra content, in that it tracks with the seasons. So it doesn't cover everything that's in the season or vice versa, but chronologically, we don't surpass where the show is. We kind of stay within the timeline of the show. But other than that, it's us on our faces in prayer, which always involves whatever we're going through personally that we're working out. So am I working out how God doesn't always heal when we ask him to? That's been a big theme of this season. Well, we're dealing with that in our own lives. And so it can't not make its way. I think everything we do as followers of Jesus is a testimony. We're always testifying to what he's doing, not just at the first moment of salvation, but really what he's doing today and what he's teaching me today. And if we're following him, we're always learning new things. And so those things find their way in. And I think in his mercy, the show ministers to us as we're ministering to other people with the show. So it's a bit of a flowing dynamic, I would say, as we create extra content. Yeah.
I'd like your insights on one last thing before our time is up. This podcast really, and my book, The Art of Friendship, it's really, the linchpin of all of it is John 15, where Jesus says, like, I'm your friend. I lay down my life for you. I tell you what my Father has told me, and I choose you first. So, it's all about me focusing on you, me choosing you, and me being transparent. And then he says, go and love each other this same way. Go be a friend the same way. It's been really fascinating, particularly in this season of The Chosen, to watch the arc of friendship, not with Jesus, which I know we'll see, but between the main characters, between the disciples, really beginning to change and grow from the beginning. I mean, that friendship is really a big story arc in there. And the development of those relationships are fascinating to watch. And particularly just as from my perspective, that being sort of my jam. Your thoughts on, I would just love any insights, because, we're watching their perspective of Matthew changing. We're watching, between the brothers, seeing themselves differently. Just your thoughts on let me do it this way. How about your insider information on just that friendship arc? I know it's intentional. Nothing is not intentional.
Yeah, I think watching the disciples struggle with this dynamic of what it really looks like to follow Jesus, and some of the harder stuff that's involved and what's required of them, and then doing it alongside people that they didn't necessarily choose themselves. And I think one of the things we have going on in the Christian community is a lot of denominational differences or personality differences or experiential differences in life that cause us to close off to people. And I think what I love about this season is how intentional Jesus is in putting people together, and how much he loves all these different kinds of people and sees the best in them, and how they start learning to see each other through his eyes. So, would all of our relationships be different if we worked to see people through Jesus's eyes and not through our own? And so that is the arc. I mean, the disciples are going to start seeing things the way that Jesus does, whether that means seeing impossible situations the way that Jesus does, whether that means seeing people the way Jesus does, whether that means seeing the future, or what's important, or politics, or whatever it is, the way that Jesus does, and approach things the way that Jesus does. But of course, it's first and foremost people, right? He says, love God and love people. And so learning to do that without all of the extra baggage and things that we bring to it, I think is a strong undercurrent of the show.
Well, it's certainly a strong undercurrent of life, and life imitates art, and art imitates life. And in this case, both are true. Amanda, thank you so much for spending time with us. Thanks for the investment that you're making in the project that so many of us, they're not just fans, but just having the opportunity to look with new eyes at things that we can allow to become very stale. And it's just another way to bring a fresh pair of eyes, and a freshness to our hearts about who Jesus is. So thanks for your part in that. And welcome to Texas.
Thank you. Thanks. And go see The Chosen in theaters while it's there. It's going to be a really special experience.